the Rotary Club of Baton Rouge, both in person and live streamed. It is a very special luncheon to be with you today to talk about a more perfect Baton Rouge. And we feel nothing but appreciation and gratitude. I'm so honored and humbled to be here with you this afternoon. I offer you a heartfelt note of appreciation for all that you do for the capital city, the labor seen and unseen, known and unknown, which benefits the growth and development of Baton Rouge. Prolific African-American author, educator, and speaker, Dr. Anna Julia Cooper was the fourth Black woman to get a PhD. And she said, when and where we enter into this work of social responsibility and social justice is critical to our ability to claim victory on our heroic and our sheroic goals. In 1892, Dr. Julia Cooper published her book, A Voice from the South. And in it, she said, only the Black woman can say when and where I enter in the quiet, undisputed dignity of my womanhood, without violence and without suing or special patronage. Then and there, the whole Negro race enters with me. So what can we learn from this prolific historical figure? The person reflected in those pages. She's the only African-American person that's featured in your passport. So when you take a look at your passport, you'll get to see Anna Julia Cooper. We can learn that we should be committed with every fiber of our being to say, when and where I enter, I will help realize the potential, the possibilities, and the promise of others. So you heard a lovely introduction of me from my colleague and my former student, Narisha Kirks-Glover. When I first received the invitation from Narisha to offer keynote remarks, there was no question that I would accept. We have a long storied relationship, and she's someone who I admire and I have a lot of respect. Her greatest asset is her dogged work ethic and around claiming victory for everyone's access and success in Baton Rouge. And the magnificent spoils of Baton Rouge will be delighted by all of the construction work that she does. So I'm enamored and proud. To President Davis II and the officers and esteemed elected officials and clergy, our capable and fearless visionary leaders around these matters, you all make us want to sit up just a little bit taller and work just a little bit harder. To my family in the National Panhellenic Council, specifically the members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and to my beloved sister links, and my higher education family, specifically LSU and Southern, thank you all so much for being here. To my most noteworthy clients of Third Eye Consulting Group, thank you so much for allowing me to accelerate your own inclusive excellence journey. And to you, the most valued Rotarians and your guests, for your intellectual curiosity, for sharing your talents and your expertise and your sphere of influence for the next generation of global leaders. I thank you for being here and for modeling the way, and for having this courageous conversation, right, around inclusion, diversity, equity, and these other challenging issues that we face. So I'm going to be Captain Obvious for you. Right now, we're living through and in some very significant times in our history. Think about all that's happening right now, painfully highlighted by the latest killing of Dante White. I say his name, Dante White. I won't use my precious time to articulate all of our current social and political dilemmas because Sherry will pull me with a hook. But suffice it to say, we are in desperate need of strategies and techniques to come together in very positive and productive ways. The blueprint for demonstrated purposeful next level leadership is long-term, is long haul, it's 1 foot in front of the other, is 5 steps forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, 3 steps back. But you've got to be committed. Do you understand that? We've all got to be committed to this. I do not disagree that the quest for inclusive excellence is a messy proposition that I'm asking you to lean into. If you haven't started, I encourage you to start. If you've started, I encourage you to persist, because our greatest opportunity is to harness and leverage all of the collective intellect and the heart that is around leadership so that we can have this real conversation, right? An authentic conversation about what is necessary around passionate action. I often say the longest 12 inches are from the head to the heart. It's the longest 12 inches that we've got to shrink. Who in here watches Queen Sugar? The Oprah show, Queen Sugar? Okay, so you got to binge watch this. I shouldn't be telling you to binge watch anything, but if you are going to binge watch something, Queen Sugar on the Oprah network is something that you should strongly consider. Ava DuVernay's drama about the Bordelon family in St. James Parish, just west of New Orleans, is trying to revive their family sugarcane farm to become the first Black farmers to own a mill. Okay, so I watched this show for 3 reasons. The Black people on the show are just beautiful, right? And I lean into the television. The cinematography is gorgeous, and Ava is doing such a wonderful job of impacting our state's economy in New Orleans and Vacherie. But the scenery looks like New Roads. So I'm like in Indianapolis, but I'm leaned into the TV because I'm thinking I'm looking at home, right? My little Pointe-Coupee parish, 3,500 people harvesting most of Louisiana's crops. That's what I come from, all right? And then I watch it because the characters are so complex. They're interesting and they're struggling every day in their most authentic selves, dealing with issues of race and class and religion and gender and power dynamics. And like all of us, they want to bring their very best selves to everything they do. So how do we do this for Baton Rouge? How do we do this for the capital city? The work of diversity, equity, inclusion can seem very overwhelming, and I know it to be true because I'm in it every day. You don't want to appear that you don't know or understand other people's lived experiences. Most of us are believers that we believe in equity and we want to make a difference in our community. Brandon Jones is my always and forever. I've known this man since I was 13 years old. He's the epitome of what a Black male feminist would be. So he's sacrificed so much and graciously taken the co-pilot seat so that I could race ahead personally and professionally. But when I took that role at the NCAA, he had to step up his game. So he knows more sports information than you all have forgotten, right? He knows it historically and contemporarily. It's very scary. He doesn't know our anniversary and he doesn't know when Valentine's Day is, but he knows any sports data that you will ask him. So every morning before we would get up and go to work, he says, okay, I got the top 4 for you. And so I would be like, okay, so it's the top 4 of the current things that happened last night in intercollegiate athletics and pro sport. And he just refused to have me not know what the men in the room knew. Right. So we got up and we talked about the top 4. But he approached it in a really interesting way. Again, Captain Obvious. I'm a Black woman with a strong ego. As if I don't need to know what you're talking about. But every time he told me, I got your top 4, I'm like feverishly writing it down. He says, you know inclusion work, I know sport. We're a perfect team. So because of that, I've often talked in 4s, right? So I have 4 lessons that I would love to share with you about the ways in which we make inclusion and inclusive excellence a way that we can accelerate the vistas for Baton Rouge. The first is you have to rumble with vulnerability. You got to rumble with vulnerability. So Brené Brown, famed sociologist and leadership guru, in her book, Dare to Lead, says, you've got to rumble with vulnerability. You got to arrive early and you got to stay late. You got to get your hands dirty. The process of creating courageous conversations, especially around racial inequities, which seems to be the hardest to tackle, we get to humanize it when we are vulnerable. You don't understand other people's lived experiences, but it's nothing like leaning in and asking the questions and being willing to hear, to really passionately hear what they have to share. These conversations are hard. They're not glamorous, but they're very value added, and they can create real change for our capital city. You're going to hear from retired Lieutenant General Russell Honore next week. Another one from False River. Okay. Without knowing what he's going to tell you next week, I assure you he is going to require you to rumble with vulnerability, right? So now listen, retired General Russell Honore will talk in a more cruder way than what you're hearing right now, right? He's not going to speak in this highfalutin academic language like me, but what I'm saying to you is he's going to reinforce everything that I'm saying. So be passionately willing to hear him just the same. I spoke with Adam Knapp several times from BRAC, and he shared with me this most recent data on disparities in Baton Rouge, where he said this disparity study compared us to 39 other metropolitan cities just like ours. We rank at the bottom of the bottom for most things. Poverty and racial disparities, household income and racial disparities, educational attainment and racial disparities, racial diversity in management, women in management, earning by gender. And we ranked at the very, very top for people working in poverty, right? You got to passionately listen to this and rumble with vulnerability. I challenge you to model the way and figure this out. You must lean into these difficult challenges. It's not for other people to fix. It's for this intellectual cohort to try and figure out how we make a more perfect Baton Rouge without being the bottom of the bottom with these significant disparities. You need to be like Anna Julia Cooper and say, when and where I enter, I'm going to rumble with vulnerability. I'm going to help realize the potential and the possibilities and the promise of others. Top 4, secondly, you need to have blazingly articulated courage. This means making the space to have these conversations with colleagues that you know and colleagues that you don't. You're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel frustrated. You're going to feel indignant, and you're going to feel angry. Have that conversation with me, because I laugh so loud, my laughter can be heard at Drusilla's next door, right? There's got to be humor and connectivity in these hard conversations. To bring us closer to our higher ideals, you've got to do this. Model the way. It's going to be hard. You got to be deliberate. You have to be authentic. You have to fear nothing. We need every one of you to help us change the dynamic of these disparities in Baton Rouge. Again, it's a messy proposition, but we need a roadmap, and we've got to operationalize our roadmap. I'm no stranger to courage, and you're probably not either. Many of you individually, and some of you collectively, I've worked closely with or I'm partnered with now. And you've helped me straighten up my backbone, and I've helped you straighten up your backbone. And the approach is not always easy. You're firm but fair. But oftentimes when I didn't want to say anything, they told me, you need to say it now. You've got to say it now. You've got to be the one. So by show of hands, who knows St. Catherine Drexel? St. Catherine Drexel, patron saint of social justice and philanthropy, the second American-born saint, was a white Philadelphia heiress whose daddy was a major financial wizard and banker. In the early 1900s, St. Catherine had the opportunity to have an audience with Pope Leo XIII. And she passionately told Pope Leo, the Catholic Church must do something about education for Blacks and indigenous populations. So, as I understand it, Pope Leo responded to Catherine by saying, I hear you, right? I know we must live our mission, but you think that you're looking at the church. And in fact, I'm looking at the church. So basically, Catherine, go make haste and get at it, okay? And that's exactly what she did, right? So she spent her fortune, her inheritance, building 200 schools, across the Southwest, including my little small, sweet alma mater, Xavier University of Louisiana, the green top roofs and the Crescent City, that will celebrate its centennial in 2025, and continues to be the place where most African-American students are put into medical school and to pharmacy school. So like Catherine Drexel, I encourage you to have blazingly articulated courage, because we've got to help realize the possibilities and the promise of all. All right, top four. Number 3, you've got to cultivate a radically clear anti-racist lens. And this work has to continue in an anti-supremacist way. So now I've said radically clear anti-racist lens and anti-supremacist way. Don't let your ears bleed, because I'm here to do this with you, right? So you don't say Katrice A, but stop it right now. Go ahead and take your seat. I'm here to do this with you. I just joined the Catalyst, and it's a group of folks interested in making sure that students who are under-resourced are able to study abroad when we're able to do that again. In the announcement of my joining the Catalyst, they used a quote that I had said in a previous talk, and it was, universities and even the NCAA have their own pace of change. Business can feel faster and more agile without delivering on promises. But the jury is still out, and we need to see where corporate is going to go in the next 5 years, especially related to DE&I. And I understand that the arc is promising and stretching towards good. So that's powerful, because if we are to make sure that we are doing our level best with these disparities in Baton Rouge, everyone in this room, the business and community leaders, need to understand you've got to accelerate and you've got to make haste, and you have to be agile and you have to be the catalyst. I am very interested in making sure that we understand that in this most recent Louisiana survey, there's a difference in the perception of Black and white Louisianans, right? So we can say, oh, we're doing our part. But this latest installment of the public policy research lab from the Riley Center says in 6 different situations, we don't think the same. In hiring, in pay and promotion at work, in stores and restaurants, when applying for loans and mortgages, and especially when dealing with the police. Dante Wright, I say your name. 84% of Black Louisianans overwhelmingly believe that the country needs to make change to achieve equal rights, only compared to 39% of white residents holding the same belief. If you go to the business report, it was just in the business report on day before yesterday or yesterday. Please see the differences in our perception. I don't want to have to go back and remind you about that disparity index study, right? So we need to have these brave conversations, because the data don't lie. We believe who we are, but the data, they don't lie. When we're self-reflective, and we can be self-reflective together, we've got to understand we must shift. When we understand that cognitive bias is just a part of the brain, this is how our brains work, our behaviors need to shift. I encourage you to read the book Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. You may have seen the movie Just Mercy, but read that book. He says we've got to get more proximate with one another. We don't know other people's lived experiences until we try to get more proximate. I encourage you to learn about St. Catherine Drexel, and her sainthood, her process to sainthood, and her commitment to philanthropy. All of my development people in the room, I'm going to say this for you: give to your alma mater. And when you give to your alma mater, give a little something to Xavier University of Louisiana too. When and where I enter, I'm going to enter and create a radically clear anti-racist lens. I'm going to help realize the potential, the possibilities, and the promise of others. Finally, Top four. Number four, you got to embrace longevity. This is long haul work. 5 steps forward, 2 steps back. 1 step forward, 3 steps back. The dedication of the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture happened. Lonnie Bunch was the founding museum director. If I had job envy, I would envy that job. He put the historical context, the moment in context by saying, the key here is that there is no future without a good knowledge of the past. You've got to know that our former Congressman, John Lewis, introduced legislation to build this museum 15 consecutive times. He introduced this legislation 15 consecutive times. You didn't hear me the first 2 times I said it. He introduced this legislation 15 consecutive times. And it wasn't until 2003 that President George W. Bush signed the legislation. And then 9 years later, the groundbreaking happened. And then 4.5 years later, after they raised the money, the ribbon cutting happened. And then it was the hottest ticket to get in Washington, D.C. The work of inclusive excellence is slow, methodical, and long-term. We too have to understand it's long haul work, but we've got to make haste because people are depending on us. You know, that disparity study. We've got to accelerate the vistas of what we believe the future can be. When and where I enter, I embrace longevity. I help to shrink the longest 12 inches that I know. So as you think about these 4 recommendations, rumbling with vulnerability, having blazingly articulated courage, cultivating a radically clear anti-racist lens, and embracing longevity, you have to do it because everyone in Baton Rouge is dependent on you. It can feel overwhelming, but you can be a game changer. Salaka Gerard is a recent author who wrote Between Two Kingdoms. She said to imagine yourself in the future is a radical act of hope. Baton Rouge is too good not to be better. Baton Rouge is too good not to be better. I remain hopeful, and radical inclusive excellence can happen because I pray as if it's up to St. Catherine Drexel, and I work as if it's up to me. Good afternoon.
Anybody have any questions?
Any questions?
Please stand if you.
Hi. So I first want to say thanks for being here. Thanks for this talk today. We first met in the best class, leadership class. Jane Shank was in that class. Yeah. So my question to you is, like, all this work that you're doing is so grand and big. I mean, Department of Justice and everything. What is Third Eye Consulting, like, is there a scale down for somebody? I only have 8 employees.
Yeah.
What's the kind of work that can be done locally?
Yes. So the question for those virtually, this is Renee Chatelaine from the best class of leadership, my class. And she was asking that she thinks that the work is very grand, and she wants to know whether or not the work can be scaled for small entities. And of course, emphatically, yes. You know, my recommendation is that everybody think about this work as 3-pound weights, right? So I go to the gym and my trainer tries to put more weight on me the next day, you know, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, this is heavier. If we all just thought about this in 3-pound weights, we all did our little bit apart, we would get to where we needed to be. So I say that leaders need to, number one, listen, learn, and lead. They need to listen, learn, and lead. Listen to your colleagues. If they say, we are very interested in, you know, some cultural intelligence, you know, training or professional development, listen to them. If they say, you know, we need to be leaders in our sector, so we need a diversity roadmap, you know, get with someone who might help you be thoughtful about how to build that infrastructure. And then you lead. You come and you say, Katrice, I'm carrying my 3-pound weight. You know, it's really important that to be thoughtful about the ways in which you are doing this. And Dave and Ebenezer from Volunteers of America, I'm partnered with them right now. And Dave is, so wonderful to say that we have to understand how to create a culture of belonging in Volunteers of America, because it is our responsibility to help America's most vulnerable. But the staff of VOA also needs to understand we have to engage. We have to be a part of the solution. So leaders can listen, learn, and lead very easily. And while it sounds grand, Third Eye Consulting Group can help you just carry those 3-pound weights. So I appreciate the question, and thank you so much for coming.
Katrice, welcome. Thank you for being here. Oftentimes we're asked questions, people of color are asked questions. What should I read? What would I do? You mentioned Just Mercy. What do you see of the many great things that have been published, particularly over the last couple of years? Like, what's the foundational, if you had to recommend 2 or 3 things that everyone in this room should read?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Terry Sterling, my Link sister and my sorority sister. So when I shouted out the National Panhellenic, she ranked in both. So the question is about the things that we need to, we should lean into and we should read, or we should be thoughtful about in terms of growing our cultural intelligence. And I'll say that cultural intelligence is, we know IQ. All of us are in here and have all of these high-powered roles because of our IQ. You may know a little bit about EQ and your emotional intelligence, but your CQ is understanding yourself, understanding your attitudes about others, being willing to lean into new knowledge, right? And so that's what she's asking about, new knowledge, and then changing your behavior, right? Just a little bit every day. And so there's so many wonderful things on the shelf. I did mention Salaka Gerard's book, Between Two Kingdoms, a Life Interrupted. And she was a Princeton graduate, and then right at graduation, got this leukemia diagnosis. And while her Princeton colleagues were going off to, their major jobs and, off to their, very fancy graduate schools and medical schools, she was going to fight leukemia. And so she said she was so dejected. She started a blog, and it got noticed by a New York Times editor. And the New York Times editor offered her a blog post and then a column in the newspaper. And people started writing to her and responding to her. So when she rang that bell, she took off in a 15,000-mile journey across the country to meet the top 20 folks that had written to her, all of these very interesting people. And that is what she said. To imagine yourself in the future is a radical act of hope. So I think that, it doesn't need to always be sort of this like textbook stuff like I write. It can be these sort of memoirs of people's lives around everyday lived experiences. I know when the pandemic first hit and the killing of George Floyd happened, many folks were leaning into white fragility. Just in terms of the ways in which we think about cognitive bias. If you had to, really just sort of Google cognitive bias, it's just the way our brain works. But these biases create systemic bias, which creates systemic racism, which creates what? That disparity study, right? That disparity study. So my encouragement is cultural intelligence, being very self-reflective, rumbling with vulnerability, being able to have courageous conversations, understanding your attitudes about others, leaning into new knowledge, and then, finally trying to practice. I'll also recommend the 1816 Project. And if you can YouTube Nicole Hannah-Jones, she puts me to shame.
Katrice, we have 2 questions from our friends on the live stream.
Okay.
Beverly Brooks Thompson.
Oh,
I'd like
Beverly.
to ask you a quick question. What do you see as the greatest change in this space in our community since you have been doing this hard work?
So Beverly Brooks Thompson helped to recruit me back to LSU from Boston Medical Center. So she was on my search committee. And so I was just so delighted to hear that she was going to be online. She couldn't be here in person. So what's the biggest change? I think the biggest change is that we're actually moving into the space of a culture of engagement and belonging versus just thinking about diversity in terms of numbers and you know, racialized numbers, more than just equality. We're moving into racial equity, equity in all of its forms, but engagement and belonging. So there's a famed HR guru, and I'm doing that on purpose for our friend, Dr. Brooks Thompson. Dave Ulrich says, if you want to see and lead change, you've got to engage internally. So internally to your workplaces, your religious houses, your communities, and even in your homes. You got to engage internally. You got to engage externally. People you don't know. That leads to the change that you are expecting because you are leaning into the ways in which we should be. So I think that the answer is we're moving to a culture where everyone feels like they belong.
And our second question is from Jeff Zimmerman. Baton Rouge has not had the civil unrest and violence that other cities have experienced over the past year. What, in your opinion, has contributed to this?
Yeah. So Jeff, what has contributed to the lack of civil unrest in our community? You know, that I've tried to think that through, Rob and Jeff, on many occasions, because I think if some of the folks knew the disparity data that I just shared with you, they'd be much more angry than in other cities. I think that, you know, we understand civility. I think that we are a praying community. And I'm not saying that that's not the case in other communities, but I just think that we're also a very divided community. So we live in very different parts of this city. I was on the plane coming into Indianapolis with some LSU alums, and I was decked out in my LSU gear, and so were they. And so we just sort of chatted it up, and they said, well, you know, you're in Indianapolis, but you're from New Roads and you're going to Baton Rouge. And I said, oh yeah, and I have a little corporate rental in Beauregard Town. They had no idea what Beauregard Town was. So that reminded me that there are parts of this city that people have never been, you know, that they've never experienced. Renee and I were in leadership together. When we did the session on higher education, we went over to Southern University. Some of our leadership class members had never crossed the hump. Like that didn't belong to them. So I think that that's a part of it as well, right? We're very prayerful, we're very civil, but we're living in very different parts of the community. One more question. Well, okay, so two more questions, and I'm gonna answer it quickly.
Okay, all right.
You too.
The question I have is, how do you encourage the majority to understand that it's not incumbent on only those people of color to be the leaders in doing this work?
Yes. So how do we encourage majority populations to take the 3-pound weight and really take the 6-pound weight or the 10-pound weight and not put the onus of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging on people of color who are experiencing racial disparity and oppression? So I wrote a book on racial battle fatigue for just that reason. Racial battle fatigue is a thing. And so, you know, if it is only our responsibility to fix the challenges, we will never get there. We will never get there, because what did I say? We've got to create a radically clear anti-racist lens and anti-supremacy way of being. We're in this predicament because you all have to pick up the 3-pound weights. It's not just me. And it's not just the people of color in your spaces. Everybody in this room, we all have to pick up the 3-pound weights to be able to get to the goal. And so I think that those top four are all of the ways, but that is the main one. To be able to lean in to say, I've got to be culturally intelligent, that this is my responsibility too.
As a young man, I spent many fine summers on Falls River.
Yes.
Had some preconceived notions which have been proven wrong as years gone by.
Mm-hmm.
That community produced Miss Gaines, Russell Honore, and yourself, all of whom are impressive individuals. Statistically, it would be anomalous for a parish and a community of that size to even generate one of those. What do you attribute 3 of you coming from Pointe-Coupee Parish and you?
Yeah, yes. I appreciate that question. So this question is about Pointe-Coupee Parish. And y'all might need to call in and say I'm gonna be late for my meeting. So the question is about retired Lieutenant General Russell Honore, famed author Ernest Gaines, and myself, all being grown up in that small community. New Roads is a farming community. So people with work ethic, right? It's the people with work ethic. My family, I was, just so privileged to have this entire community, put their arms around me. My grandfather, my dad's dad, was a sharecropper with my great grandfather, so the rest of the younger ones could get educated at Southern. And my mom's dad was the first African American in the parish to get his LLC. So I come from, the spectrum of socioeconomic class as well. They believed in food, football, faith, family. Not in that order on most given Saturday nights. It's a community that is very interesting because, like most small towns and mid-sized cities, race divided by the tracks, right? And I think that, General Russell Honore will tell you that, he's been uptown, downtown, and back of town, right? And so back of town is the community in which I grew up. I think it's really interesting when there is a commitment to others. When we lean in to others, I think, we are able to release the fullest potential of all. And so the racial disparity around educational attainment is something that is very serious. People lean into me. Now, I didn't always get voted in homecoming queen, even though, in my own mind, right? I didn't always get invited to the slumber parties, right? And I saw the bags packed in the back of the room on Fridays. And I knew that even though I was friends with all of the girls, I was not getting invited, but people leaned into each other. I think the commitment to community is exactly what that little town, did for me. And my always and forever is from that same community. He would say, Katrice has a love-hate relationship with New Roads.